where we live stream every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, unless otherwise noted. Sometimes we do Cocktails with the Critters, which is we usually do on Saturday or Sunday nights if we do them. Looking at the forecast for the next week, it is going to be very nice next weekend, so there's a very good chance I'm going to be doing a Cocktails with the Critters live from my deck here in Northwest Ohio. And that would probably be a Saturday or a Sunday night. So you can always find out. I post in our, let me show this. I post in our events page right here. Every time we do a Coffee with the Critters, the schedule, and what the topic is. And I usually add that in the night before, unless I have a guest, which I usually do it a couple days before. But for the most part, tune in every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern here on the Animal Behavior Center's Facebook page. So for anybody that is new, my name is Laura Joseph. I'm owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we teach people all over the world how to empower animals and the people that care for them. And we do that through our live streaming services. And you can find out more about the work we do on our website at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. You can also always reach me via email, and I check my email personally myself, and it's usually every morning. That is Laura at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com, Lara. So let's go ahead and get started. We got a bunch of people coming in this morning. Good morning, Brianna, Eva, Chris, Jen, Tim, Maggie, Katie, Bobby, Lori, Jennifer, Blorian. Hey, how you doing over there in Taiwan? Mark, Ray, Andrew, Patricia, Nancy Forrester down in Key West, Deb. Good morning, everybody. So let me go through what I do every Sunday morning for those of you that may be new. You can also, I really do plan on sending out an email newsletter this week. And it might be one more in depth on the topic I'm going to go into today. On our Facebook page, you can opt into our email newsletter list, and where I send out an email, and it's usually pretty intense in the topic of animal behavior, training, or enrichment. So that's what we focus on here at the Animal Behavior Center. Like I said, the majority of our services are live streaming. We've been live streaming our services for, 6 years. We use multiple platforms, but you can find out more about what we do on our website. We have memberships and subscriptions, which are kind of like a subscription to a magazine, but instead of reading, you're watching live stream training, behavior, or enrichment. We have articles, or I have articles that I have written for periodicals in there, and articles in there that I write just for people who are members. So these are annual subscriptions to our live streaming services where you can find our replays. There's a history of 5-year video library in there that's continually being added on to. Easy to find things by topic. So our level 1 is for companion animals. Level 2 is more for people who are either professional trainers or thinking about getting in the field. We have several professional animal trainers in there. We also have board certified behavior analysts in there. And stay tuned in level 2 because I've got a live stream scheduled with a board certified behavior analyst who is one of my mentors coming up. We also have, so level 1 and level 2 focus on applied behavior analysis and how we use that with animals. And then some people want species specific. They don't necessarily want to see dogs being trained to have eye drops put in their eyes, or rabbits, or pigs. They want something specific to what they have. So those are designed to add on or just have membership in the species specific, and that goes into the parrot project, the pig project, or different projects. So this coming week, for those of you that are in level 1 and level 2, we have a podcast getting ready to be recorded. A podcast is just one of many benefits, perks to your level 1 and level 2 membership. So something else we do, and I'm thinking it, like I said, we have virtual happy hours where we get together and just relax, talk about topics, and have a cocktail. Those are usually pretty popular. Something we did, so this is what I do at the beginning of every Coffee with the Critters before we dive into our topic. I talk a little bit about a recap of what has happened here the past week. So we did in level 1, somebody had asked if they were trying to figure out how to train their dog to accept eye drops. So I sat on my deck, which obviously was a couple days ago because it hasn't been that warm here lately. And I did a series of live streams showing how I trained it with my dog, Quincy, who I had never trained to do that before. So the key importance is don't wait until you need something to be trained. Get it trained now. Like we are in the process of training the lemurs that are here from the zoo, different behaviors that will make their trip back to the zoo, which is going to happen very soon. They've been with us here at the Animal Behavior Center since October. We live stream our training with them. We're getting ready to training everything that it's going to take into getting them back to the zoo and stress-free, where I will then start live streaming my training with them at the zoo. Something we did yesterday in the Parrot Project, this was pretty popular, is I did a live stream on enrichment and the importance of shaping the behavior of foraging. And foraging is the act of searching for food. Some animals know, or they're curious, they start experimenting with their environment immediately. And some need a little more work. We need to train them. We can shape those behaviors. Yesterday, I was showing how to make something really simple to get an animal, and we did this specifically in the Parrot Project, to get a bird searching for its food, and then showing how to increase complexity, because we know, studies show, with predictability comes boredom. So a lot of times it's easy for us to fall into the habit of providing the same old enrichment because it's easy for us. And that providing the same old enrichment can get boring and redundant for the animal. And when I see an animal stop engaging with an enrichment item, that's when I'm already thinking ahead of what I'm going to do next. But with this particular toy, we showed where to begin. We showed how to increase complexity. And is Brianna on here? Brianna Stoddard, because I ended up showing like increased complexity, making this toy more and more and more complex. Over a period of time, and how to keep that animal engaged. Because if an animal stops engaging with an enrichment item, I get it out of there because it's no longer enrichment. It's just an obstacle in their way. Here's something I posted in some zoo groups, and I showed how we incorporated complexity with our lemurs. This was a big hit. I live streamed every step of this way in level 2. So showing enrichment is only one of several things that we show in our live streams in our memberships. Training can be enrichment, because training involves a lot of senses of the animal and arouses the senses. So here is a banana baby food ice cube that I originally introduced on a string and showed I wanted the animals, I wanted these two lemurs, this is Dill and Pickles, to know this is what you're going to start searching for. And I hung it right, can you see that perch right in the back? I hung it right next to them, and all they did, and I knew they would probably do this, grab it, and the rope was long enough that they didn't have to reach for it. It was just hanging right there. So they just started licking it. And I was just like, okay, now that you know what it is, let's make it more complex. We showed every step of the way in doing this in our level 2, because in level 2, I work with numerous species of animals. Okay, we can do this with the kookaburra. How can we scale train a lemur? How can we get some of the recent things we've done, train a baboon that doesn't like to be touched for a voluntary nail trim. We did that. We did that through target training. So the importance is increasing complexity, not only in our enrichment, in our foraging that we're providing, but also in our training. Training can get very boring and redundant, just like the same old toy, because studies show if you're actually using positive reinforcement training, it is the animal's preferred form of enrichment. What trainer in here has not seen that? What trainer in here has seen that? When you start training an animal, increase the complexity of what you're asking. And when you do, that can be one of many positive reinforcers in your training session, where the animal is thinking, learning, trying to read from you. What are you asking me? What are you wanting to do? I train because it is such a fluent line of communication with that animal. And I train using positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis. And the reason I do what I do is because I've tried other forms of training, and this has been the most efficient, effective form of communication I have tried with any animal, and it works. And if it didn't, I wouldn't continue doing it. But the importance is, I see a lot of people getting very redundant in their training, and we can increase complexities. For example, I trained one of my dogs, Quincy. Well, I trained all 3 of them. Quincy, our Rottweiler, Levi, our deaf dog, and Snow, our deaf and blind Border Collie. I trained all 3 of them targets, different types of targets. We've got nose targets, head targets, feet target. And you can target to a proximity or to an area, not necessarily an object, but to an area. And I had trained Quincy to touch her nose to my hand, because my hand is always there. I don't have to go looking for a target stick. And it's a great form of communication to communicate to her, this is where I want you to be. Can you be right here? Will you be right here? And it's her choice. She has the choice to do it or not. If she gives me the behavior, and this is part of our topic today, if she gives me the behavior that I want, and I want for her, I want for me, and I want for the best of the both of us, and definitely for her safety, then I'll reinforce that behavior. The animal's always the one that determines the reinforcer. But the thing is, I trained Quincy numerous things. I met her when she was 5 weeks old. She came here for socialization and as a pup with her mom and the rest of her siblings. I didn't know she was going to be mine at that time, or I was going to be hers. But because I began training her and interacting with her at such a young age, she is so in tune with me. And when I ask her something, you can just see the excitement. You can tell that the type of training that I'm doing using positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis is very valuable to her and is a positive reinforcer of hers. The animal is always the one that determines the reinforcer and always the one that determines the aversive. Applied behavior analysis is using environmental events to control behavior. And that C word, control, we have a podcast on this in our memberships. That C word is not a bad word, control. We all do it. And when we tend to lose control over our environment, can cause many different types of reactions from us. Okay. And one can be fear. So a lot of us work to consistently keep control in our lives and in our environments. And that's how we keep people safe. So I can control or ask for behavior from an animal by teaching them a hand target. And they know this becomes a cue. This is a conditioned reinforcer because it's paired with behavior, it's paired with consequences, it's paired with positive reinforcers. So I taught Quincy to go from a sit to a down, but I never taught her to go from a down to a sit. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to teach her to go from a down to a sit? So what I did, which is what I do in most of my training, is I think with what does she know how to do? And let's start from there. So she's in a down, laying down position. I was like, she knows how to touch her nose to a target. So I just held my hand above her head at the point that would put her in a sit position. And I taught her to go from a down to a sit with a hand target. Then I start putting that on a verbal cue and I can start fading out my target. So complexity can come in the type of training that we do and the type of enrichment that we do. So with these lemurs, I want them working. I've also got a webinar called Work is Not a 4-Letter Word. I want all animals working. Why? Because past behaviors I've seen from my animals lets me know, using positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis, that this is highly valued for them. And positive reinforcement involves choice, control, complexity. All three of those I want in my animal's environment at all times, in some form or fashion. Me, I primarily work with Tim. Yes, animals want training. Animals want information, and training gives them information. We all want information. Look at the times we're in now. If we don't have information, we don't have control. When we don't have control, a plethora of behaviors, usually undesired, can start appearing, such as fear. So think about that, because that's what's happening in our worlds today. So what are we doing? We're seeking information. And this was the topic of my last podcast. So anybody in here in level 1 or level 2 that is not listening to the podcast, you are missing a huge part of your memberships. So a lot of the animals I work with are exotic animals. Not everybody works with exotic animals. These are undomesticated animals. These are animals, a lot are in enclosures for safety. So it's not, a lot of people think give the animal the biggest enclosure possible. Well, that depends on the animal. Is that comfortable for the animal? So what we do, because a lot of our animals are enclosures, some of the times, part of the time, or the animals I work with, I like working with exotics. I like working with zoos because I want to increase choice and complexity in that animal's environment. I want to empower the animal, and I can do that through complexity. This is what I did in this photo, is I then put that banana baby food into a wire basket and noticed where I hung the wire basket, not next to a branch where it was easy to get to, because I've been teaching these two lemurs this, which means, and I put this on cue, and this means up. Wherever you're standing, reach your hands up as far as you can and jump or grasp the top of the enclosure. And that training ended up coming in handy when when I hung this toy in the middle of the cage. So I'm increasing complexity. I sat back and watched, because also too complex can actually positively punish the very behavior you're trying to train. So I wanted to make sure these lemurs could get to this basket and continue to get to this basket. And how did they get to this basket? Was ratio strain involved? Was I pushing it? Was I pushing too far that the actual behavior I was trying to train starts to decrease? And that's what happens a lot in our training. That can happen in our training. And that can, I was like, is that snow falling from the sky? No, it's leaves. Or bugs. It's the apocalypse. Sorry, squirrel. That complexity can be a positive reinforcer, or it can be a positive punisher in our training and in our enrichment. Which one is it? That's why observation is very key. When I'm putting in any type of enrichment, I'm sitting back and I'm watching. How is that animal interacting? Does that make sense? And studies show that a lot of animals in enclosures, be specific. What is an enclosure? An enclosure could be any four walls, your house. A lot of animals in enclosures seriously lack problem-solving abilities. And that is why I do what I do. I am here to increase problem-solving abilities into this animal's environment at this animal's pace. And why do I do that? Because it empowers the animal. And that's where your 3 C's come back in: choice, control, and complexity. I give a webinar and a presentation on that too. A yard, exactly, Jen. If that yard is surrounded by a fence, it can be an enclosure. So my point there is, it's not necessarily the space that is important. It's what they're doing or not doing within that space. I have a 10,000 square foot facility with grass, banana plants, flowers, fig trees, grapevines. And I take some of the animals out there and I'm like, go, run, fly, explore, go do something besides hanging out on me. And what do I see is the animals may run, fly, jump, but if I go sit down somewhere in this little chair within 10,000 square feet, it doesn't take too long before that animal is on my head, on my lap, on my feet, licking my hands. And what does that tell me? We have a slogan here that we say all the time: find everything that's awesome in your animal's environment and be that animal's deliverer of awesomeness. And that's how I know I'm staying on the right track, is when I see animals continually come up to be on me, near me, next to me, and I'm sitting in a 10,000 square foot facility and they're all right here. So that tells me that it's not necessarily the size of the environment, it's what is in the environment. Now, whether that is in their 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot enclosures, on exhibit, whatever. So empower those animals. And we do that through behavior, training, and enrichment. Studies show if you're training an animal, if you're actually using positive reinforcement, It is the animal's preferred form of enrichment. And that is why I do what I do. And that is one of the reasons I picked today's topic. Why positive reinforcement does not work, because there are arguments out there that it doesn't. What does work mean? Are you getting the behavior you want? There's a couple more photos I wanted to show before we get into the topic, and that is we now have our volunteers starting to come back in. We're going on week 2. And what I've noticed since we've been stay at home, lockdown, quarantine, whatever you call it, since mid-March, is enrichment is essential. And that is my mission to prove to the world. Enrichment is essential. That we see the consequences of the stress, anxiety that has been put upon us because we are, I don't want to say we were being forced to stay home. We were being highly encouraged to stay home. Businesses were shut down. So yeah, that part we were forced to not go to work. What does that, when we're doing that for our safety, but we see that staying home for 40 days and not going outside of our house, that causes anxiety, stress, fear, frustration, anger. What do those look like? So hopefully in the past 40 days, maybe this has given us time to think, how does this relate to our animals with not being able to get out of their enclosures, no changing enrichment? This is why I train, because I can become part of that enrichment and I can incorporate enrichment that changes daily, weekly, at least weekly in animal environments. So our volunteers here are a very important part of the animals' enrichment, and they have greatly missed the volunteers, because that's the variety that changes in their environment. And every volunteer here interacts with an animal differently. So I had the opportunity during the past 40 days. It was important for me to get these animals out of enclosures daily, changing, moving. I can switch them from one enclosure to another. I can move them from one room to another. I can move them from one environment to another, as long as it's not stressful for them. So getting into this is my last photo before we really dig deep into this topic. The animal is always the one that determines the positive reinforcer. This is Jelly Bean, an education curl-crested Aracari that we're training here for a zoo I work very closely with. And what am I seeing? You know what I mean? A lot of people who don't, positive reinforcement does work. It does work. If it's not working for you, you're not using positive reinforcement. And many people can get very confused with this. This started with the reason I picked this topic is because somebody posted on my LinkedIn page this past week, and I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. She was saying how she wished I could give presentations using applied behavior analysis with people. I do. Whenever I give a presentation, I am using applied behavior analysis with people, because in order to get to that animal, I need to get through to the person taking care of it first. So every time I give a presentation, I am using applied behavior analysis with everybody in that audience. And that means I'm constantly observing the audience. I'm constantly looking around. I make sure I make contact. And I'm doing this on purpose. I'm target training. I want your eyes on me. I want your eyes on me, because if your eyes are on me, just like with any animal that I'm training, I can now be more effective and start communicating, and it creates that connection. When I play a video and it shows on the screen behind me, I want your eyes on that video. I'm using intermittent schedules of reinforcement with the audience. Eyes here, boom, eyes there. Now I'm going to start talking again. Eyes here, because I've learned in film school, because I have my bachelor's degree in documentary filmmaking, keep the screen changing, because people get bored. Speaking of that, people get bored with the same old thing on the screen all the time. That's why you constantly see me doing things like this. I try to keep it changing. It's very hard for me when I am speaking in a live stream and I have a big control panel here on my screen that I'm trying to take care of, and keep you engaged in what I'm talking about. But anyways, this person, Sheila Gibson, comes on and says, just came on very confused about positive reinforcement doesn't work. The topic is why positive reinforcement doesn't work. I chose this topic. It popped into my head based on this conversation. I'm going to go through a list with you that I have listed right here as why positive reinforcement doesn't work. It does work. And if it's not working for you, you're not accurately using or efficiently using positive reinforcement, because it does work. Hey, everybody. I see Sylvia and Judith just came in. What was I saying? Oh, back to the audience. I am using intermittent schedules of reinforcement. I'm using positive reinforcement. A lot of times, eye contact is an aversive. And if I'm standing at a podium, looking down at an audience, and I say, hey, John, what do you think about that? That attention can be a positive reinforcer, or it could be a positive punisher for that person. I intentionally do not call on people in an audience, especially when they're not making eye contact with me, because this is why some people don't like surprise birthday parties. But surprise birthday parties are somewhat of a ritual to human beings. Let's surprise them. People who don't like attention, that is going to be a major aversive to them. Yeah, Amanda says that explains why I was so confused about the title. I posted that title, Why Positive Reinforcement Doesn't Work, because I knew a lot of people would be like, what the heck is she talking about? I also knew a lot of people that would say, I know what she's getting ready to do, because I promote positive reinforcement in addition to applied behavior analysis. Positive reinforcement is only a very small portion of applied behavior analysis. But back on the topic of this conversation, I saw somebody post on my LinkedIn saying, I wish you could use applied behavior analysis on humans, because there's so many people out there that think the use of applied behavior analysis is cruel. That is not the first time I have heard this. I've heard it about 3 times, and her saying this last week was the 3rd time. The very first time I have heard this was a conversation I was having with Dr. Patricia Anderson, and this was probably about 5 years ago. And she said there's a lot of people out there that think applied behavior analysis is cruel. And when she told me that, I was just like, what in the world are you talking about? It is one of the least invasive ways to communicate with people and with animals. Jen Hirakawa and I were just talking 2 weeks ago about using other forms of interaction with animals, okay, Pat is on here. Good. Pat, feel free to chime in on this conversation. Jen and I were talking about how we have used other forms of interaction with animals, but they weren't the least invasive. It was a lot of force, a lot of use of aversives, positive reinforcers. Positive reinforcers are aversives. A lot of use of aversives to control behavior. If you want to take a look into the work of negative reinforcement and positive punishment, turn on the news right now. There is so much negative reinforcement, so much positive punishment in the news, which is why I turned the news off 4.5 years ago. And I did turn it back on to listen during the pandemic. And I'm listening to conversations and I'm just like, the news can get very confusing. I was like, which way is it? What are you talking about? Give us information. Let us decide for ourselves. Just give us the information. But what the news is doing is creating topics to create interest, and they can use fear to get you to tune in for ratings. Hopefully I don't get the media pinpointing me. But I can notice positive newscasters using positive reinforcement. Our governor is using positive reinforcement. I see the news stick fear. You are being negatively reinforced to tune into the news. Negative reinforcement means a behavior happens to escape, avoid a consequence. And sorry, can't do two things at once. I was like, my screen's not changing. The news uses negative reinforcement to get you to tune in. Negative reinforcement is a behavior happens to escape, avoid a consequence. And I'm going to create some fake news right here. Say new mutation of a virus has evolved. What are you talking about? I need to tune into this broadcast to escape, avoid consequences. There's fear. You've captured my attention. You've got it. I turn on the news. Boom. Yes. Sylvia says news is punishing her behavior. She doesn't want to watch. I haven't turned on the news in like 3 or 4 days because I've got animals to tend to. And what I'm doing now is listening to my friends. What's new? What's happening? And I did that last night. I was talking to my sister and I was like, oh, I didn't hear about that. And it's because I haven't turned on the news in 3 days. Isn't that amazing? News that's 12 hours old is old news. Okay, Pat is the one that I was having the conversation with. That was probably about 4 years ago, Pat. 4 years ago, where we had a conversation about some people thinking applied behavior analysis is cruel. And I was just totally flabbergasted. And I was just like, I've never heard of that. And I went to a presentation once where I saw somebody defending applied behavior analysis. So I'm sitting in there in the audience and I'm like, why are you defending this? You wouldn't be defending your point unless somebody is out there not supportive of it. So behavior doesn't lie. Behavior doesn't lie. So that was probably 6 years ago where I was watching this presentation at a conference. I was just like, oh, so some people must not believe in the power of this work. Yes, Pat, and that is just where I'm getting ready to go. So the second person I heard from that said, some people think applied behavior analysis is cruel is one of our volunteers who is a registered behavior technician focusing on applied behavior analysis. And she said, some people think it's cruel. And I'm just like, I don't understand. This is the second time I've heard this. And so we delved deep into a conversation, and the consequence, the information I learned, because I kept asking Brittany, tell me, give me examples of what you're talking about. And when she started giving me examples, I was like, well, they're not using it correctly. Or they're just not using it, period. So what it told me is that they didn't understand the use of it. They didn't, and you understand through studying it, and you understand even more by applying it. You can be as book smart as you want, but if you are not applying, when I was really deep into studying applied behavior analysis in my master level classes, I would read only so much, and sometimes I would read it twice to really make it sink in. I'm a very visual person, so I'm reading, and I'm reading aloud, so I tend to understand faster when I read aloud. I've always been that way. So I would read so much information, shut the book, turn around, apply. And I would apply it to the animals in my environment. I applied it through watching ants walk across my patio table. I'm like, why are you walking over here? You're walking over here, obviously, because there's a reinforcer over here. What is it? Because I need to find out why, because I'm afraid of insects. When you apply it, you can begin understanding the science behind it. Application is key. And if you are not applying it, I guarantee you don't thoroughly understand it. And see what Amanda has to say. I had a student in my dog training class say, in other words, that it was cruel because it's manipulative. Oh my God. But they were willing to. Okie dokie. Amanda, you're in level 1, right? Did you listen to the podcast on control and manipulation? We are all manipulative of our environment. And manipulation is not a bad word. I used to want, and I've told people in my memberships, I wanted a t-shirt that said Master Manipulator of My Environment. People who understand applied behavior analysis would think that was funny. People who don't understand would probably look at me and go, ooh, stay away from her. So I chose not to have the t-shirt made, because it's all about understanding the information and the education. So how many of you have heard people say positive reinforcement doesn't work? I've read it. I've read online people say that, and I was just like, "Whoa, but it does." If positive reinforcement didn't work, I would stop using it, and the animal would stop responding. Then, if either one of those things happen, you're not using positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement does work. We study the science of behavior, B.F. Skinner's laws of behavior. And here's when people say positive reinforcement doesn't work, the first thing out of my mouth is, what did you do? Or show me what you're doing. Or if the animal stops responding, you haven't accurately identified the positive reinforcers. Positive reinforcers can change from 1 second to the next. They do for us. And positive reinforcers can change from one environment to another. Positive reinforcers can change when environmental events change. I'll give you an example of an environmental event. I'm sitting here training my dog, Quincy. We're having a conversation via positive reinforcement. This is why I do not like people talking to me while I'm training an animal, because you're interrupting my conversation with that animal. Communication is happening, and positive reinforcement is so much more than using food. Because if you're only using food as a positive reinforcer, it is only a matter of time before you find yourself stuck in a situation where food is not going to work. And you identify positive reinforcers by manipulating the event, observation, identification. Give you an example of an environmental event. I'm sitting here training my dog, Quincy. My other dog, Levi, walks in the room. I get this behavior from Quincy. Boom, behavior just changed. Boom, environmental event. Levi walking into the room is an environmental event. Jen says, Learning and Behavior, 6th edition by Paul Chance is a great textbook. I go back to it all the time. Yes. We were just talking about that. I believe in level 1, somebody had asked for a book to read, and that's the one I suggested. Anything by Paul Chance is not going to do you wrong. I'm a big fan. I would show you my stack of books over here, but I would show I'm not very organized. I have a ton of books over here by Paul Chance, B.F. Skinner. I listen to and read a lot. I've got a big, thick book over there, about this big, that I asked for my birthday, called Schedules of Reinforcement. Cheers. There is a dinosaur on there. So wow. Lisa says there's a autism Facebook page and a dog trainer in Facebook that claims that ABA is cruel. Anybody that claims that ABA is cruel does not understand it, because I am not going to use something that's cruel with a baboon who can do serious bodily harm to me in a second. I'm getting into enclosures with alligators. I do not want to be using force, coercion, escape avoidance behavior, negative reinforcement, that's coercion, positive punishers with an alligator. Okay? I want alligators coming to me because they know good things are going to be delivered from me when they give me behaviors that I request. Notice that I say request. I never say the word command, because what is a command? A command depends on how you use it and what happens. Could be a negative reinforcer. It means do it or else. Okay? That's negative reinforcement. I do not command an animal to do anything. I do not command a gorilla to give me a behavior. I request it. If they don't give it to me, I got some work to do. I'll start running through. I'll sit back and start observing, and I need to identify positive reinforcers. Manipulation is not a bad word. Okay, if you think manipulation is a bad word, what's your alternative? Okay, all right, I'm open. Then show me how you're going to get this behavior. And it's probably going to be with some type of force or coercion. Okay, I don't want to be paired with that. I will manipulate an environment to get a behavior that I need. We're working on nail trims and voluntary restraint right now. In the Parrot Project, in level 2, we're working on teaching a dog to accept eye drops. All right. I am teaching his communication. I am communicating with that dog. And that dog is manipulating me too. I'm okay with that. That dog can be training me too. I'm okay with that. Okay. Because, and what I'm doing is identifying reinforcers of that dog at that time, and boom, delivering them via shaping, reinforcing real small approximations towards the target behavior. Because I need that dog to allow me to put drops in its eye. And If I don't train it and manipulate food reinforcers, how else am I going to get that behavior? Can I put it in a headlock and squirt the eye? Sure. Sure, I can do that. Punishment works. Aversives work. If they didn't, we wouldn't do them. But when we know better, we do better, right? Um, I am so interested in having the most positive experience in relationship with that animal, which is why I do what I do. B.F. Skinner says the main form of control today is coercion. And he also says it doesn't need to be like this, because when we use coercion, meaning do it or else, meaning negative reinforcement, meaning the person or animal gives you the behavior to escape, avoid the consequence of not doing the behavior, such as getting fired. We stay at work till 5 to do a couple of things: collect a paycheck and escape, avoid being fired. Okay. Boss comes in, says, do it or else. Tell me how you feel. How does that make you feel? Okay. Versus a boss coming in and saying, and I've given this example before because it happened to me. I had a boss that said, do this or else. And I'll tell you what, I didn't do it. I made him think I did it. He upset me. I felt not empowered, and like I wasn't worth anything. So what I did is I went back to my desk, twiddled my fingers, went back in through the disc on his desk, and said, sorry, I tried to open it and I couldn't get it to open. Sorry. Versus, so he was using coercion to try to get behavior from me. We got it. Just was it. That's the key. He got it, but it wasn't what he wanted. Whereas if he came up to me and said, and it was 4:59, and I'm cleaning up my desk and getting ready to leave. And that was the last job I've ever had before I went into doing this. And I will fight like hell to keep my business going because I'm being negatively reinforced, positively reinforced, but also negatively. I do not want to enter that work world again because I'll probably will get fired. But I would find the most positive employment opportunity. Versus, okay, so if he would have come to me at 4:59 and said, Laura, I'm in trouble, I would have been like, what do you mean? What does that mean? Give me information, because now I'm scared. I need information. That you give me information, and he did. And there's the immediacy. Boom, disc. Gives me information immediately to help control my fears. He's like, I'm on a deadline. I can't get this disc to open. Will you help me? And I would have said, absolutely. And I also would have said, I would have sat there and worked for free for probably the next 2 hours to help him because he asked me to help him, versus giving me a threat, an ultimatum, do it or else. Working with me with ultimatums, I'm not going to work for you very hard or very well. Or if I do, and don't we as trainers know this, I will give you the least amount of desired behavior. I will give you enough behavior to get me out of this situation because I don't feel very good. There are several different, I've got my bullet pointed list here, and I didn't even get through half of them. But most people, let me see if I can get through them real quick. Most people don't understand reinforcers and reinforcement. Lisa Phillips, you called my name. Has there ever been an animal that just would not comply? Lisa, great question. I get to ask this a lot. What does comply mean? Okay, I need more specifics. Is there, and if yes, what did you do? Lisa, I know what you're talking about. Is there an animal that would not give me the behavior I was asking for? Absolutely. all the time. Okay. And that usually happens when I walk up into a situation where I'm usually sitting there observing. Next thing I'm doing, um, identifying positive reinforcers that I can deliver for behavior I want to maintain or increase. And if I will start where I think I can get the behavior. And if I go in and ask something and the animal doesn't give it to me, I can end in a couple different ways where I can end it with something that it does know that I can deliver a reinforcer. We just did this in the live stream on level 1. Quincy's behavior changed and she wasn't letting me touch her eye like she was like 7 seconds before then. I would go like this and she'd go like this, or she'd back away. I can't remember exactly what she did. And I was just like, whoa, something changed. What changed? I've got to figure it out real fast because I don't want to keep sitting here requesting behaviors and not be able to deliver a positive reinforcer, because what's going to happen is the animal is going to stand up and walk away from me. It's not what I want. Or I am going to positively punish the very behavior I'm trying to train, because Skinner also says you must never, well, he says numerous things. I'll tell you what he says and I'll tell you what I say. You must never reinforce an undesired behavior. And I say you must always reinforce requested behavior. And most people don't know that positive reinforcers are so much more than food. So, Lisa, you were asked, so what do I do? What I did in that situation is I asked twice. I don't want to ask again because I'm not getting the behavior I want. And the positive punisher for me is knowing what's likely to get future predictable behavior. What's getting ready to happen? The dog's going to stand up and walk away from me. So what I did is I take a few steps back. I'm moving too fast. The environment's changed. Something has changed. Something could have changed in her thought process. I can't see her thought process. And this is what people in applied behavior analysis do. They work from observable, measurable behavior. This happened twice. I don't want to see it happen a third time. I don't know what's going on in your head. All I'm doing is collecting data on behavior. What's happening? This is starting to be reinforced, and I don't want that reinforced. So before I have to counter condition, retrain, what I did in that particular instance was step back in my training. I went back to touching where she was comfortable, which was her back. Bam, bridge, reinforce. So now I'm observing behavior. I've got eye contact back on me. This is what I want. So I start moving my hand back up her back until I'm back at her eye within seconds. So thanks, Jen. Yes, I've requested behavior and didn't get it. And if that happens, don't request it again, because you're likely to not get behavior you don't want again. And if that behavior maintains, or if that undesired behavior maintains or increases, it's now being reinforced. And that's exactly what you don't want. Number one, many people do not understand reinforcers, reinforcement, rates of reinforcement, variety of reinforcement. A lot of people do not understand those. A lot of people do, and they do it well. And those are the ones that I support and I want to sit down and train with and have some mind-blowing conversations with them and the animals, and keep them involved. A lot of people, what is a reinforcer now can change in 2 seconds. So that's why I tell people, get your list of reinforcers, because you may be able to muzzle that dog in your kitchen, but once you take it to the vet, tomorrow you have a vet appointment at 10 a.m. Take the dog to the vet. Guess what? You're going to try to put that muzzle on, and that dog is going to say, oh, hell no. Okay? 2 biggest steps in the shaping plan. That's another one I see quite a bit. We talked about changing reinforcers when the environment changes. Anybody that says positive reinforcement doesn't work or applied behavior analysis doesn't work has more studying and application to do. I know, I've seen it, and I stand behind it 100%. I like to challenge people. Show me a behavior that you don't think you can get with a positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis. I will challenge you, and I will show you how you can get it. Because if you don't use positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis, what are you using? What are you using? It's likely force, negative reinforcement, and aversives, positive punishers. I don't want those paired with me. I always train an animal in case those cage bars are not between us at some point. And I have found myself in that position. And I am like, thank God I have this relationship, the relationship I do with this animal. Because if I was sitting there pairing myself with aversives and all of a sudden cage bars come down, guess what? I'm in some serious trouble and I don't want to be there. And I won't be there because I know better. So I challenge anybody that thinks they can't get a behavior using positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis. If you're watching this live stream or watching the replay, challenge me. I'm happy to show you a different way that it can be done. And if I stumble, I'll reach out to my friends for help. I'll reach out to my training friends for help, because in the end, it's going to be the animal that pays for this. So if you guys liked what you saw today, this is what we do in our memberships. Level 1, companion animals, using applied behavior analysis with companion animals. Level 2, people thinking about getting in the field, wanting to get more in depth with applied behavior analysis, more understanding. Our level 2, these are annual subscriptions. We also have our projects, which are species specific, which a lot of people are in the Parrot Project and level 1. A lot of people are in the Parrot Project and level 2, or in the Deaf Dog Project, or in the Pig Project. Level 2 involves my working with numerous species. And a lot of times I go live where I will say, I have never worked with this species before. Never worked with this species before. Where do I begin? We have our referral program for, thanks Kim, thanks Nancy, thanks Judith. For every 5 people you refer to us that sign up for our referral program, we give you a 1-hour free consultation. Last slide I want to show before we end, which this means the world to me, the Sam I Can Foundation. This is our nonprofit that we have here, is getting ready to get active. What's the next case? And when the Sam I Can Foundation gets active, there's usually some sadness behind it, and some goodness behind it. So you can find out more about the Sam I Can Foundation at samicanfoundation.org. Also, if you are not a follower of the Sam I Can Foundation's Facebook page, go do that right now, because that's where you'll see the live streaming of the work of the people who donate to this nonprofit and support this nonprofit and run this nonprofit. So with that, I want to, hey, Jen says, level 2 is a great group for trainers. Thank you, Jen, with you being the awesome trainer that you are. There's several level 2 members on here. I appreciate you. Anita Jacobson, good to see you. With that being said, happy Mother's Day, everybody. Take care. When we know better, we do better. We can do better.